Welcome to The Read Down, your weekly progressive political hot take by the Stonewall Democratic Club. On this week's episode, the Senate acquits Donald Trump. A gutless GOP acquits Donald Trump, but not without 7 senators voting against party lines, meaning that a bipartisan majority of senators voted that Trump was guilty, and yet here we are with an acquittal. We're going to talk about how power is out across most of the United States, including particularly Texas because of this snowstorm, and who's to blame. We will give you the latest on this and more, all while reading the GOP for filth. This is The Read Down. Hello, everybody. Welcome to The Read Down. I'm Alex Mohajer. I'm so pleased to have you guys all back this week. And we have a lot of special surprises for you. I'd like to welcome to the program my co-host, Ebony Murphy-Root. Hello, Ebony.
Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. It's good to see you.
Nice to see you as well.
We've got a lot to cover, and our co-host, Jonathan Welch, is out this week, as you know, Ebony. So thrilled to take his place this week is Tess Rafferty. Hello, Tess.
Hey, happy to be here. Thank you guys for having me back.
Hey, Tess.
It's a twofer. We got you last week. We got you this week. Can't get enough.
I know, and now I get Ebony this week too.
Yes. So It's just the rotating panel, ever rotating. And
I can't run into her anymore at like political gatherings like I used to. So now like I just have to like bump into her online like this.
Back when LA was our own little small town.
I know.
Right. Me and Ebony had brunch many months ago, outdoors, socially distanced, when we thought Corona was going to be a thing of the past, and then we were like over it. Like, I think we've crossed the. It was a long time ago.
How silly we were.
I know. Every time I like get to the point where I'm like, I feel like, well, maybe I could do this. It's all very cautious behavior, but then like you find out like someone who hasn't left the house in 6 months got coronavirus, and you're like, all right, well, or something happens. You're like, I guess
never mind.
Yeah. I am the groundhog. I'm poking my head up, going back in, being like, all right, I'll just watch West Wing again.
Yes, and now I just live in crippling fear, alone in my room. But Tess, Ebony, we've got an amazing special guest this week. I'd like to welcome to the program none other than Janessa Goldbeck. Hello, Janessa.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Am I saying your name wrong, Janessa?
No, I mean, as far as I know, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to take it from you that that's the right way to say it. Thanks for joining us, Janessa. How are you doing?
Oh my gosh. I'm doing like COVID fine, I think, which is to say I'm grateful to have a job and health insurance, and everything else is trash, but I'm glad to be here.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you've got health insurance right now, then you're doing okay. Janessa is a Marine Corps vet and an ADEM delegate to California Assembly District 78. So we're really pleased to have you, Janessa. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
It's great to see you. So we've got a lot to cover this week, and it's that time of the week for the weekly read down. So this is where we go over all the hot topics and current events of the week and kind of give our take for our viewers. And first and foremost, let's start with the light stuff, really. It's the record winter storm that has paralyzed Texas and other southern states. Really, there's snow covering the majority of the United States, but Texas has been hit particularly hard. The White House hasn't hesitated to offer a state of emergency for Texas, which is just, a nice refreshing change that we don't have a president who acts with political retribution to the states that didn't vote for him. But either way, the storm has been getting a lot of attention because the Texas infrastructure, electrical infrastructure, power grid, has not been able to sustain the cold temperatures and people have been experiencing power outages and no electricity for going on 24 hours or more. And this is in the freezing record cold. So a couple different things are really coming to play here. One is just how shoddy the power structure is in Texas and how they've sort of touted being a state that's independent of the rest of the states in terms of their power grid. And then there's the issues of equity and the disparity in the people that are getting power in the state of Texas. Ebony, what are your thoughts on what's going on in Texas with this with the storm and the power crisis?
Well, you know that Texas is, the live free or die of the South, and they are always talking about how independent they are and how regulation is not needed and don't tread on me and all of this. So I did a little bit of research this afternoon on this deregulation stuff. And basically right now, there are these surges where if people are using their electricity, they might be charged $9,000 for however many megawatts. And, I'm not a fan of tons of government regulation, right? People complain that California is expensive because of regulation, but clearly some regulation is required, or else you have a situation like this in which capitalism, right, this rampant capitalism is not working for the people, and that something very necessary, heat in a storm, is not available. So it will be interesting to see if some of our Texans, and we know that many of our Texans are, more on the liberal side, but if some of these right-wing Texans step up and say, hey, you know what, a little bit of regulation is needed. That will be interesting to see. And I hope that everybody stays warm and safe. I want to put that in there.
Janessa, what do you think about this? So Texans, are maybe known for their more conservative bent and people who refuse to wear masks and refuse to have their liberties taken away from them. And yet now the governor of Texas is telling people to stay at home so that they don't die during the storm. Didn't really care about the stay-at-home orders when there was a coronavirus crisis. So are the conservative people in Texas who frequently vote against their own well-being and self-interests, are they going to take a note from this, maybe call for a Green New Deal, maybe demand that there's an updating for their power structures so there's a renewable electricity in the state?
Well, I think if one thing that this absolute tragedy and failure of government really shows us is that there is a role for government to come in. Like Ebony said so eloquently, whether or not you're pro-regulation or against regulation, clearly totally deregulating a grid and failing to pay for updates that would make it able to handle a shock like this has serious consequences, and people are dying as a result of it. So I hope that it is an unfortunate illustration of what happens when we fail to account for the gaps in our capitalist system and actually let the government step in and make up for things that are not necessarily going to have solutions on the free market. But that being said, I think the bigger point here, aside from the human tragedy of this, and my heart goes out to everyone who is living through this and might be without power tonight or heat, and there are a lot of people who are hurting tonight, is that this extreme kind of weather that people are experiencing in Texas is going to just continue to increase and compound over time because of climate change. And I feel like that's a big part of the conversation that's missing right now. We're going to see increasingly hot fire seasons here in California. We're going to see increasingly cold winters in the Northeast. And unless we really address the root cause of that in a big way, leading with the federal government and international agreements, we're never going to come to a solution. So I hope that this is a wake-up call for people around the country that are still questioning whether or not climate change is real.
Yeah, I can't believe that we're still having to even bring it up as a question whether or not climate change is real, and yet there is a constituency of people. I wonder, Tess, did the Trump administration really hurt this country by
oh yes, yes.
Yeah. Cool. That's the question. But I mean,
I'm sorry. What was the second part of the question?
Yeah. The really irrelevant, but you got the gist of my question. But with this conspiracism and this casting a doubt on facts and calling into question whether or not climate change is real, I mean, in 4 years, did he set us back a generation? Because it's not just about the fact that climate change exists and is having devastating impacts and extreme weather events are becoming more increasingly prevalent. It's that the Texans, for instance, in poorer neighborhoods are noticing that there are power outages that don't apply to the wealthier city centers. So this concept of climate justice and climate equity comes into play when you realize that climate change is not only real, but it's affecting certain communities more strongly than others.
I mean, yes, like, you know, Donald Trump did nothing to help this country and certainly made a lot of things a lot worse in it, without a doubt. But, you know, I think we also have to, you know, recognize that in a lot of these cases, these have been problems that have been decades in the making. And we have to recognize, you know, as like, look, you know, decades ago, we, you know, most of us probably couldn't like vote, right? Like in this show, but we have to recognize what's our literacy as an electorate, right? And I don't mean like in the ability to read. I mean the ability to like look at the issues. You know, Amy Klobuchar, God love her. Amy Klobuchar opened her campaign for president, you know, 2 years ago with this big thing about infrastructure, and everybody acted like she was their mom on their birthday, giving you socks for your birthday, right? Like everyone acted like she made a sugar-free, gluten-free cake for your birthday. Nobody was interested in it. It seemed really boring. It's kind of like hit the snooze button, right? But like the reality is that's the stuff that we needed to be fixing for years here. That's the stuff we needed to be paying attention to, particularly as it affects marginalized communities. And so now, like, you know, what we're seeing is we're seeing the result of all of this come to fruition when we have extreme weather like this.
Yeah, we need a Green New Deal. We needed it, in my opinion, we need a Green New Deal. We needed it 10 years ago. We need
but we also need to fix existing infrastructure.
We need to start building the infrastructure of a renewable electricity grid and renewable energy systems, because we haven't even started building them. I mean, we've started tapping into solar power and wind power in certain elements, but creating a system where this is a groundwork is laid that it becomes our energy grid is going to be a lot of difficult work, and it's going to be an interstate deal. And a Green New Deal, I think, will help stimulate our economy and create millions of new jobs. And I don't know why we have not made it well, I can tell you why we haven't taken more proactive steps towards it, but I'm hopeful that Joe Biden has signaled that he intends to make climate change a major focus of his administration. Let's hope that he's able to make that happen with all the conflicting sort of competing interests that are needing some air in the room right now. So let's move to the big news of the week. And there's no way around it. We got to still talk about Trump. So yeah, that's the reality. But this weekend, the Senate acquitted Donald Trump in a 57-43 vote. You heard that correctly. Despite the fact that a bipartisan majority of United States senators voted that Donald Trump is guilty of inciting an insurrection due to the 2/3 majority threshold in the Senate, because it's a supermajority institution and an undemocratic one at that, Donald Trump was acquitted nonetheless. What are your guys' takes right off the bat on this? Were you expecting a different outcome? Ebony, what did you think watching this acquittal happen?
Sadly, this was the outcome that I expected, but 7 GOP senators voting to convict Trump of being responsible for this insurrection was huge, very important. And also, I think it was a stunning display of democracy at work. Jamie Raskin, Stacey Plaskett, Joe Neguse lets me know that the Democratic bench and future leadership is deep. So I'm very pleased about that.
Yeah, and some, there were 7 GOP senators who crossed over. Some of them were not surprising. Some of them were. Richard Burr in North Carolina being one of them, a surprise. Cassidy in Louisiana, although he did vote that the hearing would be constitutional, he was a surprise. It's not often you hear about a Republican senator from Louisiana siding against his party, particularly Trump. So what did you think about the 7 senators, Janessa, who crossed over? And was there anything good that came out of this result?
Well, this was definitely the most bipartisan impeachment trial in American history. So that tells you something right off the bat. I think every American should be outraged and horrified that there were members of the Senate who chose to put their allegiance to President Trump over their oath to the Constitution. I think that speaks volumes about where we are as a country and the partisanship that has really infiltrated to a point where people aren't even there to serve; they're just there for power. And so I came out of it with sort of two minds. One, I was glad to see some Republicans cross the aisle and do what was right. I was angry that the rest couldn't find a spine, but I was mostly really incredibly impressed with the impeachment managers, as Ebony was saying, because of the way that they came into that trial. They were speaking to history. They were speaking to the people in the future will open history books and read and watch the testimony that was put out on the Senate floor. The case was made, and it is up to history to judge President Trump for his crimes. And hopefully that case, because it was so eloquently and explicitly made, will go down in the history books for the right reasons.
Yeah, and Janessa, right after the Republicans acquitted Trump, Mitch McConnell, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, took to the Senate floor after voting to find Trump not guilty, got up on the Senate floor and gave a speech where he just excoriated, really brutalized Donald Trump, laid guilt at his feet, explicitly stated that Trump should be tried in criminal court, that he was irrefutably responsible, and that the House Democratic managers, as you said, did a fantastic job of providing an irrefutable, unrelenting, chronological, videographic demonstration of the evidence for their case, and it's irrefutable. I want to play a clip here now, and I want to get your reaction, Tess, of Mitch McConnell just skewering Trump. Here's Mitch.
American citizens attacked their own government. They used terrorism to try to stop a specific piece of domestic business they did not like. Fellow Americans beat and bloodied our own police. They stormed the Senate floor. They tried to hunt down the Speaker of the House. They built a gallows and chanted about murdering the Vice President. They did this because they'd been fed wild falsehoods by the most powerful man on earth. Because he was angry he'd lost an election. Former President Trump's actions preceded the riot were a disgraceful dereliction of duty. The House accused the former president of, quote, incitement. That is a specific term from the criminal law. Let me just put that aside for a moment and reiterate something I said weeks ago. There's no question, none, that President Trump is practically and morally responsible for provoking the events of the day. No question about it. The people who stormed this building believed they were acting on the wishes and instructions of their president.
Once again, Mitch McConnell's mouth is writing checks that his actions don't cash. Seriously, it's like Mitch is like the guy at the frat house who stuck the roofie in a girl's drink, and then he's, mad that, he wasn't around when she got assaulted or something. What is he refuses to recognize his own complicity in any of this. And there's just no bottom for these people. There truly isn't. There is nothing that could happen that could possibly make them do the right thing in an effective way ever. He could have allowed the charges to be brought to the Senate floor before Trump was out of office. That would have been the safe thing to do. We sat there like sitting ducks for 2 weeks, just waiting for him to do it again, and no one was there to stop him. Instead he doesn't allow the impeachment, articles to come to the Senate floor. He calls a recess. Then he's like, why didn't they come here sooner? Like he had nothing to do with it. And then he's like, oh yeah, but he did this. Yeah, we all know he did it. You just getting there. I don't know that I can be more disgusted than I already am.
Tess, I want to do a little word association game, okay? And I want you to just answer the first thing that pops into your head. First word, okay? Don't even think about it. Immediate first word that pops into your head, okay?
It's going to be something there. Just okay.
Would you rather jump into a pool of water that's infested with piranhas and sharks, or have lunch with Mitch McConnell?
I'd rather have lunch with Mitch McConnell because I'd get to tell him everything I thought about him. Like, I don't want to go swimming with sharks and piranhas. Like, they might eat me. But I'll throw a drink in Mitch McConnell's face and watch him melt. Absolutely.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I came up with that scenario just on the top of my head. I should have thought of something a little more odious. But the point still stands, Ebony, that Mitch McConnell's odiousness and cravenness is going to last even as he leaves the Senate majority in disgrace, having lost his coveted position of Senate Majority Leader, which in my opinion is maybe one of them. I mean, with just how undemocratic this institution is a position of extreme power, maybe even as powerful as the President of the United States. Even though we call them co-equal branches of government, let's be honest, the man gets to, as the majority leader, was able to decide what comes to the floor and whether or not it would even get a vote. So, Mitch McConnell, what are your thoughts? Here's a game for you, Ebony. Give me one positive thing about Mitch McConnell.
You know, for such a craven person, his skin is actually very plump. You know, a good rosy glow. I could
stays
say
out of the sun. He stays out of the sun.
Yeah.
Turtles with the shell, sunblock. So Ebony, regardless, we're not going to find good things to say about him. But Mitch McConnell did vote to acquit him and then gave this speech on the floor of the Senate. And the thing is that today, a lawsuit was filed in civil court. So this is the first civil lawsuit to be filed against Trump for his incitement to insurrection. And it was filed by a member of the Democratic caucus of the House of Representatives using an 1800s anti-KKK law that was meant to prevent violence implemented by the KKK against lawmakers during the Reconstruction era. So in this lawsuit, they're citing directly to Mitch McConnell's floor speech on the floor of the U.S. Senate. Have you heard about this lawsuit? Are you heartened by it? Is there still time to hold Trump accountable for this insurrection?
I don't know if this man will ever be held accountable. What can be said about right now is the way that so many on the right are willing to flip things around so that, the right thinks that 1984 is their piece of literature, that, they make these false equivalencies between Black Lives Matter and the KKK, that Ayn Rand is somehow Rosa Parks. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm just so disappointed with our unwillingness to call things what they are and let them get away with misnaming things. I think that that's going to be super important in the next 4 years, is to call things what they are. And I'm just going to shout out my girl, Jen Psaki. Is that her name? Jen Psaki. She is doing it. And more of us need to do what she's doing, which is call things what they are and make them tell the truth about things. That is going to be really important.
I mean, I do think it's like we have to keep saying it as much as possible. I go to these moments of just pure unadulterated rage, over these things. And, like one of my many, many rageful instincts is like, I want to call Ted Cruz's office. I want to call Holly's office. I want to say, what are you doing with your, I want to say to the staffers, do you not have shame? And what always stops me is I'm like, you know what? I don't know who these people are. They might just be trying to make $1. And what are they? I don't know what their circumstances are. I try to have compassion for it's not that easy to find a job. But at what point do you go, no, you're at what point is that are you the guy, answering phones at Nazi headquarters? I mean, when do we decide this? I really don't know, but I wonder if we shouldn't just say to these people, do you sleep at night? Do you think this is okay?
Yeah.
I honestly don't know. I'll take my answer offline, Alex.
Well, I can't answer that question because I lose sleep over this. I can't imagine that people like Lindsey Graham get any sleep, but yet they're so craven and relentless that.
I think he probably sleeps fine. I mean, that's the problem, is that you can't shame the Republican Party right now. Like, there truly is no bottom. There's no conscience. There is no sense of right or wrong at all. There's no value for the life they claim to be for.
Well, I'm going to push back on that a little bit, Tess. I do think there is a sense of right and wrong for them, but I don't think it's about the battles of the day that we get so wrapped around the axle around. And I'm talking about Democrats. Their game is all about lighting the things that we hold valuable on fire, while they deregulate, increase, change the tax code to increase inequity in this country to one of the greatest levels it's ever been. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer, and they continue to inflame these battles between white working class Americans and low income people of color and all the rest, everyone else who is just trying to make a dollar in this country and get by. And I think one of the things that I hope we can keep sight of is, Trump is like version 1 of the worst things to come. He was one of the dumbest presidents, if not the dumbest, that we've ever had. And he was able to wreak havoc because he had this entire system behind him that knows that, intentionally using the battles, his racist language and his horrible policy positions to distract us while they are fundamentally changing the tax code, giving corporations big breaks, stripping benefits from Americans, plundering public lands. These are the things that we have to keep our eye on, because it's the system that empowers the brown shirts, the people picking up the phones at Nazi headquarters, who are people maybe just trying to make a dollar without a moral compass, or just have so much need that they're going to do whatever it takes to get by. And it's the system that requires our undying attention. And that's the thing. I hope we just don't take our eye off that ball.
I think it's a great point, Janessa, and very important to note that if we're going to look at historical trends, Democrats are set to lose their majority in the Senate and the House in 2 years. Not 4, not 6, in 2. That would be what the normal historical trends would suggest in terms of our power dynamics. So we have to be very cognizant, you're absolutely right, about the threat that is posed by having Republican lawmakers. So Republican voters will vote in bloc, en masse, for Republicans, a lot of times because they believe that their elected leaders represent their values, and Republicans have done a great job on the messaging game of suggesting that they represent small government and family values and fighting against socialism and boogeymanning socialism and boogeymanning democratic policies and ideas, even though democratic policies and ideas and progressive policies and ideas are overwhelmingly more popular if you remove a partisan affiliation to it. That being said, we're at a real risk of losing our majority and having to go through this all over again. And someone who is very mad at the GOP, and I want to get all of your thoughts on this, is House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who in no uncertain terms took to the podium to impugn Mitch McConnell, the GOP, Donald Trump after this acquittal. She was really fired up. Here's a clip of Nancy Pelosi following the acquittal of Donald Trump.
What we saw in that Senate today was a cowardly group of Republicans who apparently have no options because they were afraid to defend their job, respect the institution in which they served. Imagine that it would be vandalized in so many bad ways that I won't even go into here, and that they would not respect their institution. That the president of the Senate, Mike Pence, hang Mike Pence, was the chant, and they just dismissed that. Why? Because maybe they can't get another job. What is so important about any one of us? What is so important about the political survival of any one of us that is more important than our Constitution that we take an oath to protect and defend? Oh, these cowardly senators who couldn't face up to what the president did and what was at stake for our country are now going to have a chance to give a little slap on the wrist. We censure people for using stationery for the wrong purpose. We don't censure people for inciting insurrection that kills people in the Capitol.
You're here.
Ooh! Nancy Pelosi, queen. Let's go around and talk about this. I mean, Nancy Pelosi is frequently the only person in the room to criticize these GOP members. What do you think, Ebony?
You can tell that she's unafraid. You can tell that she's got this many kids, umpteen grandkids, and a fridge full of ice cream because she does not give a F. However, she needs to be even tougher. Like, call them out, name names, talk about what the Democrats are going to do to hold these people accountable, because their words are powerful, but we need even more powerful actions from Big Nance, because, again, like you said, we're looking to lose seats in Congress. New York might lose a couple of seats. California might lose a couple of seats. Redistricting and gerrymandering are really putting us in a tough position, and we need to let the people know that we are going to fight. The people want to see the Democrats fight, and so I want to see even more fight from Nancy. I don't care if it's pencil cloth. I don't care what her outfit looks like. I want to see fight from her and everybody else.
Watch out, Ebony, because somewhere a Republican lawyer is splicing out video of you saying we've got to fight.
Probably.
Tess, so here's the deal. So the GOP is not going to repudiate Trump. That much is clear.
No.
He is the standard bearer of the party. But there's a lot of hemming and hawing about which way the party's going to go. A lot of GOP senators were censured after their conviction vote, and members of the House who voted to impeach were also censured by their state Republican parties. So it looks like there's like this civil war happening in the GOP. Can the GOP come together in time for the 2022 midterms? And will they continue with their Trumpism?
Well, I mean, what part of the GOP do you mean? Do you mean like the guys like William Weld? No, like they're gone. They're voting with us now. They have lost control of the monster, you know? We've got a really big problem with the GOP in our country right now, because we literally have like two parties trying to control our government, and one of them are criminals. Like, one of them don't care. There's a whole party that doesn't care if people get murdered, or if the president commits treason or incites an erection. Sorry, he couldn't incite an erection in anybody. Incites an insurrection. I had to just end my point right there. They don't care. And where I do want to see people tougher is we needed to expel all of those people spreading the lies with no evidence. It's like they are destroying our government, and we're giving them a seat at the table, while they're destroying it. It's like, no, we're doomed if we can't get the criminals out of our government, if we can't get the people who are destroying the institution out from the inside, then we're doomed. We're just doomed. And the GOP can't police their own, because what happens is the GOP gets crazier, and the people who were more moderate, the people who still had a conscience, they're the ones who get pushed aside.
Janessa, how do people fight back against Trumpism, and do you see this as a civil war in the GOP that might harm their chances in 2022?
I definitely think that they have a lot of internal reckoning to do. I don't know that one side is necessarily better than the other. I just think one side is better at hiding their overarching strategy, and the other is more blatant about their racism. But to get back to your original point, Alex, which was around how the GOP sort of runs on these ideas, guns, God, pro-life, anti-abortion, and then they govern along with their priorities being deregulation, tax reform, and really the Democratic Party doesn't really do that as well. We talk about the things we're going to do when we govern. We don't talk about the things that are popular, even though, as you said, there are some very broadly popular ideas that are owned by the Democratic Party. So I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time to protect our majorities. On one hand, our elected leaders should be working on dismantling the systems of corruption that allow the Republican Party to flourish. So ending Citizens United, doing whatever we can to do that, passing H.R. 1, reforming the tax code to give working class and middle class Americans a break. But at the same token, we need to be talking about the things that we stand for in a really public-facing way that are broadly popular: universal pre-K, universal health care, legalizing marijuana, making sure that we're decriminalizing some of these drugs that have sent historically communities of color to prison in much higher percentages and numbers than white people. And doing these things that are, widely popular across America, across class, talking about those things repeatedly. But then when we get to government, making sure we're attacking the structural things that create this system, that have exacerbated this system of inequity. And I think if we do those things, we'll hold our majorities and potentially expand them and be able to make the Democratic Party itself more progressive.
Well, look, I hear you, Janessa, and I think what you're saying is spot on, but we have the problem of this supermajority institution that is the United States Senate. And so what tends to be the pattern here is that Democrats gain control for a small period of time. They try to push through the agenda, the very popular agenda of the Democratic president or standard bearer. Republicans obstruct, they filibuster, nothing gets done. Republicans blame the Democrats for the failure and inaction and then take back power. And so long as the filibuster exists, Ebony, I'm going to turn to you. Your thoughts on whether we can even get any of this done without eliminating the filibuster. Is square one that the filibuster must go?
Oh, geez. This is a tough question. I don't know. What I do like about what Janessa just said, though, is that we need to be much clearer about what we can do for the people. Janessa just laid it out really clearly, and I think that our side is not as good as that. I don't know if we need to read more Laycock, if we need to just go back to the drawing board, take out our notepads and say, what can Democrats do for the people that Republicans don't do? Because they keep kicking our butts on this angle, right? I see Michael saying that these people who stormed the Capitol think that the GOP is going to help them. And we know that they're not, right? But they think that we're elitist and we're going to bop them over the head with our books from college or whatever. So we need to do a better job of explaining, here's what they really do when they're in power, and here's what we do. And I don't know how we can be more clear about that. I think about it all the time. And that's what I'm going to be brainstorming for the next 3 years, is how can we express clearly to, folks like all of our parents. My dad's a truck driver, right? We all come from working class backgrounds, right? How can we get the rest of the folks on board with what it is we're trying to do? Because Mitch McConnell's not on their side. How do we express that?
I don't know, Tess, what are your thoughts on this? How do we get that done? How do we convey that message?
Well, I think we like to lay that fault at the Democratic Party or the Democratic candidates. And, I think, on a case-by-case basis, yeah, sometimes that is the problem. But, one thing I find is that we're not looking at we're not faulting the media coverage, which has to change. It isn't. And I don't know what to do about that. In places where it's just not blatant Sinclair broadcasting, propaganda. It's, even the mainstream networks covered, in 2016, they spent a total of 32 minutes covering policy in the 9 months of the election, and it's shameful. And Hillary Clinton got the short end of that. She didn't even get her policies talked about as much as, Trump's policies, such as they were. So, I think we have a media problem, because at the end of the day, we could be saying whatever we want. And a lot of times we are we're saying a lot of very good things. We've got good plans. We've got good policies. They're well thought out. There's a swath of them, depending on where you fall in the spectrum within the Democratic Party when it comes down to the primary. And the reality is that the media is not talking about them. And then on the flip side, again, this goes to empowering our electorate with some agency. A lot of people don't want to read about it. They don't want to, they don't want to find out more. They want to, have reactions to headlines at best and not really look at what's involved in something. They get, they get very reactionary, and it's it doesn't help when that's on our party too. It doesn't help when our party is oh, we need this. And it's okay, well, did you know that this candidate actually has a policy for that? You know, I mean, we can only fault the Democrats so much before it's like we all have to do a little better. We have to educate ourselves. We have to empower everyone to educate themselves too.
You know, fun fact to your point, Tess, fun fact, you know, Donald Trump in the 2016 presidential election received $1 billion worth of free media coverage, and analyses of media representations of that election cycle were done, and he received $1 billion of free media coverage. And there is something to be said about our corporate media structure and the way that it creates narratives, and because they're selling sleep number mattresses at the end of the day. So what sells? How do you keep people compelled? How do you keep the drama up? How do you sell a story? And so when Donald Trump won the Republican primary back in 2016, which was by all accounts an abomination. I mean, all of his counterparts in that primary were calling him all sorts of terrible names. I mean, really ridiculed and belittled him. And then he won the primary, and the media got hard at work portraying the contrast between Hillary and Donald Trump. And here's Hillary sitting in
Oh, I like that she's over me.
She's always with us. And then there's the disembodied head too. You know, they got hard at work at portraying the difference between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, like as if it was, you know, a difference between Coke and Pepsi, when really it was Coke and sewer water. But because they had to normalize this and create a narrative. And so by doing that and by giving him so much media coverage, they normalized a person who is a belligerent, incompetent mafia boss. And here we are 4 years later picking up the pieces.
And let's be clear, in the media, there is misogyny, there's misogynoir, and there is racism in the way they cover candidates. And so they're complicit in that too. You know, it doesn't do us any favors. You know, to try to have have candidates that look like us when, you know, the media is grading them on a curve.
Right. And so often not holding the right people to account. I mean, this can come down to, you know, Janessa, I want to get your thoughts on this. You know, does the media have a role in helping shift the narrative back towards truth and a responsibility, rather? And do you see that this is a failing of the media as one of our institutions of government?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I have a degree in journalism, actually, and it's really disheartening to see how the media has been so consolidated and sidelined. And, you know, people will get sick of hearing me say it, but I do think the number one threat to our democracy is corporate money in politics. And the more consolidated our media companies get, the less local news coverage that we have, which is statistically and research has proven that it tends to be more objective. You know, the more and more people are getting their media either from an algorithm that's directing them towards extremism via social media, or from cable news that is really just pitching to a particular vein and trying to stew up controversy because it gets clicks and views, the less civic engagement we actually have and the less actual conversation we have. But I think all of that is the point. The point is that the powers that be, the folks that are running these multi-billion-dollar global corporations, the super wealthy in our country, they don't want Americans engaging in civil discourse around policy points. That's their worst nightmare. What they want is for us to go rip at each other's throats over tweets that are sent, and to get enraged about, you know, who's canceling who's racist against who, you know, the faux idea that, you know, that there's some sort of attack on white culture. You know, all of this is smoke designed to distract us from the greater point, which is that our rights are being stripped away from us on a day-to-day basis as inequity grows across the globe, but particularly here in America. And so I think that there's a lot we can do legislatively if we get people elected who are willing to do the work. Congress could actually fund local news. We could write a piece of legislation to do that, right? We could break apart these massive tech companies with antitrust laws. But the way that we get those things done is by electing people who are willing to do that work. And unfortunately, the way the system is rigged means that the people who get elected are the people that have the power of these giant money entities behind them. So we have to think strategically about how we break through that system. We cannot play in that system and expect to win as progressives. We have to think differently. We have to organize differently. We have to find different bases of power. And we have to, in the Marine Corps, we'd say we want to off balance the enemy. That's a 3-to-1 attack, right? And again, this might get spliced up in some horrible clip and shown at an impeachment trial later. But when I say off balancing, it means what are they not expecting? You know, the way campaigns are run now, so much is around how you can communicate with a voter. Can you send them mail? Can you be on the air? Can you be on digital, up on digital with advertising? And is there a way to break through and get around that? We have to think really, really strategically about that. And I'm not sure that we're doing that yet as a party.
Well, I'll tell you what strategy worked in Georgia, where we just elected the president of the United States, a Democrat, for the first time in 30 years, and 2 Democratic senators. And I think there's some sociological studies that need to be written about why and how those campaigns were effective. But it seems to me, from my layperson's perspective and the person that's observed politics for many years, is that what was happening in Georgia was that they were turning out voters who had not been a part of the process before, rather than try to convince people that don't agree with you, that are going to vote party line no matter what, regardless of anything. How do you appeal to people who have been disenfranchised, who don't usually participate? I think that is the key for progressives, because our ideas are more popular. So why aren't more people turning out to make sure that they are made into law?
And it's not just the people who don't participate, it's that we disenfranchise the people who do participate. Any number of places Hillary Clinton would have won in 2016, won the Electoral College, if we hadn't done things like throw out 80,000 votes in Detroit that we just didn't fucking count, Sorry if I'm not allowed to say the F word.
Oh, you say the F word as often and as frequently.
I couldn't remember. Yes, we have to empower the people who do feel disenfranchised, but there are people out there who are voting and who are, their districts have been gerrymandered. There's active voter suppression. Their votes are getting thrown out and not counted. And in the post 2016 game day thing, everybody was like, "Oh, how do we reach the white people who voted for Trump?" We don't need to reach the white people. We need to make sure that every black and brown vote in this country is counted, and that's something that I don't think it's talked about nearly enough. It's what is it, 50 years, almost 60 years past the Voting Rights Act, and we're still doing the same stuff.
I don't want to start another Democratic civil war, but I'm old enough to remember when Bernie Sanders, one of the things I took issues with him was after the election of Donald Trump said, that we weren't doing enough to win over the white working class, and I just thought that was really tone deaf, but that's neither here nor there. Ebony, so what are your thoughts here on engaging the people that have been left out of the system, and also fighting voter suppression to make sure that access to voting is easier and more accessible?
Well, you all know that one of the things that we talk about constantly in 8th grade humanities is voting as, something that you need to do for society. And some people think, well, you shouldn't make kids feel like, they have to vote. You know what? I feel like voting is something that maybe obligation is not the wrong word, but we need to be training young people that it's part of being an American to show up to vote. And that if they tell you can't, you push back. Just like if they told you couldn't, go see whatever movie you wanted to see. So I think that that's really important too. Kids are generally 16, 17-year-olds are amped to vote. And then something happens in between that age and 25 where people lose that enthusiasm. So we have to capitalize on that. We also need to make sure that people have IDs. And this is something that I'm learning a lot about. We all know that IDs can be expensive. You lose it, you've got to go to the DMV. We've got to make IDs easier to get so that when their GOP says, oh, people are just showing up to vote without ID. We need to make multiple forms of ID easier to get in this country. And then I think the last thing that's important to do is to let people realize that it's not an every 4-year thing. You should be voting for a dog catcher, whatever is in your town that is, to vote on, show up, whatever it is, school board, bus stops. People just need to be voting in their town from the bottom up. So it's not a once every 4 years thing. And once you get people showing up at those town halls and, the power structure sees, oh shoot, people are showing up, I think it's going to generate a lot of enthusiasm. We got to keep it going.
And accountability of our elected officials, important too. Right now, Jonathan Welch wanted us to shout this out, and I'm glad to do it. Right now, Joe Biden is engaged in his first town hall since becoming president on CNN. Since you're watching us, I'm going to recommend that you watch it on your recorded devices after this program, because it's not going anywhere. But I'm anxious to see him talk about his COVID-19 relief package and the Democratic proposal, which is going to get no Republican support. And I don't know if that's smart or not. I think probably not. I think it's going to be very much well received by the public. But Joe Biden giving his first town hall tonight. And with that, we are at the 50-minute mark, which means it's that time of the episode, everybody, to open up the library. This is our chance to read somebody for filth, speak from the heart, get on our soapbox, and just get angry, get sad, just talk what's on our minds and our hearts. And I'd like to start this week with Ebony. Who would you like to read?
My read this week goes to Senator Lindsey Graham, because Senator Lindsey Graham urging Lara Trump, niece of former President 45, or whatever his official title is now, to run down south. Here's the thing. Lindsey Graham floated for years and years on this idea that he was the bestie of John McCain, that he was really a good guy. And now that John McCain is no more, his true colors are coming through. He is a nasty guy. He has no morals. He has no actual platform. I can't figure out how he got so many votes down south. But I want to see people. I'm not going to use the word fight. I want to see some of the people who've known him for 20 and 30 years calling out the fact, including Meghan McCain, by the way, that he's not who he said he was. And I don't understand why everybody lets him get away with this. So I want to see people calling Senator Lindsey McCain to the carpet and not using any of this like ha ha, wink wink, maybe he sees escorts kind of thing, because that is kind of homophobic and gross. I want us calling out that he's not sticking up for the people of his state and that he's not a kind person. So my read is to Senator Lindsey Graham. We've got 6 years to do it. Let's go.
What do they have on you, Lindsey? What are you so afraid of? Who'd you sell your soul to? Because I'm old enough to remember in 2016 when you called Joe Biden the best man in politics and never met a nicer person, and crying tears of love and admiration for the man. And now you're Trump's bootlicker. It happened too fast. The turnaround's too quick. I don't believe that they don't got something on you.
Who wants to be senator until they drop dead anyway? Like, that's what I don't get with any of these people. Like, it's like, you were senator. Like, if you don't like what's going on, you don't have to stay there. This job is not that important. You can go have a nice life. You can retire. You can get a cushy job on a couple of boards and pull down some money for showing up 6 days a week. Like, I fail to understand. Is it just the power? Is that really what they're drawn to? I just don't get it.
Well, and Lindsey Graham promised as a part of, and I don't want to derail us too much. We got to get to Janessa's read. But, Lindsey Graham campaigned in his first run for the U.S. Senate, campaigned on a promise that he would only serve 2 terms and not anything more. And he went back on his promise, and now he's serving his 3rd term in the United States Senate. So he's a cowardly, lying, backtracking, craven bootlicker, and I'll never forgive you, Lindsey. With that, Janessa, who would you like to read this week? The library is open.
Well, I think I'm going to just address something that really bothers me in politics generally, which is the cult around our elected officials and the cult-like thinking around them. Like, we either, if there are people that we love, we venerate them, they can do no wrong. And if they, well, that's rude. And if they are people that we disagree with, they're the worst. And let me be clear, I'm not excusing any of the like blatant misogynistic, homophobic, racist behavior from some of our compatriots on the right. But what I am suggesting is that maybe we as a society could take a step back from treating politicians like they're celebrities and instead treat them like they are people who we hired to do a job, and hold our own people equally accountable, ensure that we are fully unaccepting of anyone who is going to cross a moral or ethical boundary, but really like take it down a notch. Like, there are people on the right and the left who are not the people who are in the news every day. And I'm talking about people who are not federally elected officials, but your state assembly members, your state senators, who might be cutting backroom deals, all the time. But because they're not federally elected people, we're not really paying attention to them. Let's actually zero in. Ebony talked about making sure that we're engaged not just at presidential election years, but all the way down the line. And if we really approach civics and politics in the sense of like, this is an ongoing thing, it isn't just a once every 2 or 4 years thing, it's all the time. People aren't just evil or good, they're everything in between, and there are things to hold them accountable for and praise them for. I think if we approach politics with that mindset, we might actually get a lot more done. And again, that isn't to say that we should excuse behavior that is absolutely abhorrent. I just think that we let our own party get away with a lot. And we could do some real self-analysis in terms of making sure that we have better people by not just putting people on pedestals just because they have a D after their name.
I think you make a good point. I think it's an interesting balancing act of making sure you're not destroying the coalition that's needed to fight back authoritarianism and fascism and everything terrible that is the Republican establishment, while at the same time holding our own elected officials accountable to do the things that we put them in office to do for us. And it's an interesting balancing act. And I think it's been a very interesting moral question for the last 4 or 5 years, particularly in the aftermath of Obama's administration and in the age of Trump, about, we are in the minority, and being in the minority is devastating for our country because of the negative consequences that it has. And at the same time, do we then attack people that are in our caucus? And it's just a very interesting balancing act, and I think a great point, and I appreciate it.
And just to put a finer point on it, I'm not talking about attacking people in our own caucus. I'm actually talking about lowering the temperature so that we can hold people accountable, but then we can also cross the aisle to work with people who want to work with us on stuff like legalizing marijuana and decriminalizing some of the drugs that have caused so many people to go to jail for so long.
Well taken point. Thank you for that, Janessa. Tess, who would you like to read this week?
Well, shocker, I'm going to talk to the Republicans. I want to be clear, this is not for the Republicans who crossed over in 2016 and voted for Hillary. It's a little bit of those of you who didn't vote for Hillary but voted for Joe. But it's really for those of you who voted for Trump twice, right? I say you like they're watching this. It's for those of you who voted for Hawley and Cruz and McConnell and Graham. When I was growing up, my dad had a saying. It was, if you stop believing, you stop receiving. And he was talking about Santa Claus. But I think we need a policy like that around here now, too. You don't get to vote to overthrow the government. You don't get to suborn treason. You don't get to be complicit all of this and then get to receive relief money and other stocking stuffers from a government you no longer believe in. You don't get to vote for the monsters who squandered a whole year of dealing with a pandemic, denying its very existence while 500,000 people died and more lost their livelihoods, and then get to roll up your sleeve like a junkie in a shooting gallery when the vaccine comes out. Get to the back of the line. I want my money back, you stupid monsters, you craven sociopaths. I am so done with this abusive relationship. They don't get to wield a torch with the other village idiots and then expect Jimmy Carter to show up with a hammer because their house burnt down. That's all I have to say.
Boop. That's all I have to say to you, Tess Rafferty. Getting my goat.
Seriously, it makes me so mad. Every Republican should be the last person in this country to get the goddamn vaccine. It makes me so mad when I see them getting vaccinated. No, you didn't believe in this. You didn't fight for it.
Particularly people like Joni Ernst, Senator Joni Ernst, who called it a hoax and shit, and then was just first in line with her sleeve rolled up, like you said. Ooh, that just rankled me. Thank you, Tess, for your read this week. I have so much to be angry about today. I just feel like from the minute I woke up, there were things on social media, on the news that were annoying me.
I feel that, Alex. You doing it right?
Yeah, it's just people are getting on my nerves. For instance, Fox News, who celebrates Donald Trump's, this crowd that showed up for Donald Trump. I guess he was leaving the golf course, and he's Hannity and all these Fox News turds are saying, "Oh, the crowd of Trump-loving people spontaneously showed up to celebrate the president on President's Day as he's coming back from the golf course." They weren't spontaneous. It was a pre-planned media event. Give me a break. It was part of Trump's rehab tour. And now, fresh from his acquittal, he's going to be back around trying to regain power in the Republican Party. And he's emboldened, as per the usual. The Republicans have let him off his leash once again. And the log cabin Republicans. Let me have a field day with you, folks. The nicest word I could think of for the log cabin Republicans in your President's Day message, touting all the things that Donald Trump did for the LGBTQIA plus community. Give me a break. This is the exact kind of indoctrinated, ridiculous fluff that has allowed this rampant loser to stay in power and have so much influence for this long. Stop voting against your interests, for God's sake. It's ridiculous. And then, finally, my focus is now turning to Letitia James and Fani Willis, the attorney generals in Washington, D.C., in New York, in Georgia, to bring criminal charges and continue to probe the criminal conduct of the President of the United States and the civil probe of his Trump organization. Because if the United States Senate refuses to hold him accountable, then our criminal justice system must. And if he doesn't, then I'm very, very frightened about what it means for our democracy that someone could incite a violent insurrection against the seat of our government with absolutely no consequences. And that's my read for the week. This has been The Read Down, your weekly progressive political hot take by the Stonewall Democratic Club. If you like this content, please visit us at stonewalldems.org/join for only $25 a year. You too can become a member of this fabulous organization as we go into our next election cycle and work to elect progressives and Democrats across Los Angeles, California, and the country. So please give us a join. I would like to thank my co-host this week, Ebony Murphy-Root. Thank you, Ebony, and congrats on being accepted to the Emerge Leadership Program.
And Janessa as well. We are.
Congratulations, Janessa. I want to thank Janessa Goldbeck, our guest this week. Thank you so much, Janessa, for being here.
Thank you for having me. Come down to San Diego anytime. We'd love to have you, with a mask. 6 feet away.
I will. Let's schedule a date. And I'm down. I'm assuming you were talking to me and Neil.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great. And last but not least, I'd like to thank, sitting in for Jonathan Welch this week, the lovely Tess Rafferty. Tess, give me the name of your book, Under the Tuscan Gun, right?
Under the Tuscan Gun, right here.
Look, I didn't even have to be prompted to plug your book.
And its sequel, Buon Fatale. They're both out on Amazon right now.
Thank
you want a little escapism, a little murder mystery set in the Italian countryside? Check it out.
I can't wait. I'm going to order it. But thank you so much, Tess, for joining the Read Down. This has been the Read Down. I want to thank our stage manager, Peter Denz, for all his hard work behind the scenes. We love and appreciate you. And we will be back next week. Thank you guys so much for joining. This has been the Read Down. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Peter.